Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie, and today we are going to be diving into Holo Taco's latest collection called Off the Deep End. This lineup of 6 shades features a new finish to the brand, which are these jellies filled with iridescent flakies, most of which also have a reflective glitter. As always, I will save more of my thoughts for the end after some comparisons and even recreation attempts, but for now, let's just get into the swatches. The first polish we have is Wait a Minute, which is described as a teal aqua jelly base with iridescent flakies. So I would say the flakies in this one are primarily gold. There are some pops of blue and green, but that just might be from the teal base. And the formula on this one was really nice too, where as you can see, the first coat provides like a nice even wash of that teal jelly base color. And there were a decent amount of flakies in here. I thought doing a second coat would give me enough coverage, which it kind of does as far as the base is concerned, but I personally feel like there's this sort of bald spot almost of flakies in like the dead center of my nail. So I did end up doing a third coat for this shade and much prefer how it looked. I just love how all of those flakies are layered up with each coat. It just looks so multi-dimensional. But for my full hand swatches, I did just do 2 coats, and I honestly think they are pretty passable. Again, like my shorter nails here, there's very minimal visible nail line. I feel like a lot of it is covered up with those flakies, which by the way, absolutely glow in like lower or just more indirect kind of lighting. I was so mesmerized by these. The next shade we have is Crashing Out, which is a cobalt or royal blue jelly base packed with iridescent flakies that shift between pink and purple and some pops of blue as well. There's also a silver reflective glitter in this one. This is definitely the more true blue of the collection, but I feel like the flakies almost make it look purple, especially in the bottle, but once you see it on the nail, that really bright cobalt blue base comes through. The formula on this one was a little bit more finicky for some reason compared to the last shade. I don't know how well you could tell, but on the first coat, I feel like some of the flakies were just really bunching together and not spreading out as evenly, so it wasn't as self-leveling. I feel like I did go in with a little bit of a thicker second coat, and I found it opaque enough for me with, you know, some manipulation, but it's not like it dried down lumpy or anything. I also think this one just generally looks a lot more opaque on the second coat because it is a lot darker than Wait a Minute, but of course that could also just depend on your nail length and your application. But again, this one just shined in lower lighting. I really loved the contrast of the flakies against the base in this one. Next up we have Made Me Ink, which is described as an indigo jelly base packed with these aqua and maybe green iridescent flakies, as well as a silver reflective glitter. So hopefully during this application you can actually tell that this is indigo. I feel like seeing it in the bottle on camera, it definitely looks incredibly similar to the last shade, Crashing Out, but this is definitely a blue leaning purple or blurple shade. I absolutely love this one. I would say it's my top favorite from the collection. I think the color is so beautiful. I just love the combination and those flakies, but I did kind of have a similar experience with the application on this one, being similar to Crashing Out, where it just wasn't as self-leveling on the first coat, and so there were these like darker spots where you saw more of those flakies bunched together. So again, I did go in with a slightly thicker second coat to just try to even it out and provide more of those flakies. Here for my full hand swatch, my middle finger ended up being like slightly thinner coats, and you can just see the difference in like the amount of flakies. So again, you might need a third depending on your preference and your application, but I still loved the shade. And of course we have another purple. This one is Don't Be Jelly, and it's described as a magenta toned purple jelly base. So it's a lot warmer in color compared to the more blue toned purple in Made Me Ink, and this one has these pink and aqua with I think flashes of green and orange, iridescent flakies, as well as a pink reflective glitter. The formula on this one I thought was really nice and smooth, where it's self-leveled pretty well too, definitely a lot better and less finicky than the last 2 shades at least, which I thought was so interesting because I was starting to think that maybe it had something to do with the reflective glitters, but this one also has them, and I don't know, it just had a better application application experience. So as you saw, I just did 2 coats for this one as well, and I thought it looked really great. I mean, I think the base color builds up super beautifully. It's obviously really packed with those flakies, so it just obscures your nail line. This one is pretty similar to Crashing Out, where it has a really high contrast between the colors of the flakies against the base, which I just really liked. I thought this was going to be my least favorite because I don't normally love red tone purples like this, but I really enjoyed this one. Then we have What a Catch, which is described as a bright hot pink jelly base with gold iridescent flakies and a light green reflective glitter. Naturally, I do think this one is very pretty, but it's definitely a lot darker and much more of a cooler toned hot pink, which I think will be a lot more obvious in comparisons later. So even though I personally wouldn't call this a bright hot pink, I was still expecting this to be one of my favorites, but I just didn't love the formula on this one. As you saw in the first coat, I feel like this just didn't have a self-leveling formula, and it was also surprisingly sparse with the flakies, so it wasn't that same issue that I had with the previous shades where there was just so many flakies that they started to bunch up in the same place. So unfortunately, it didn't really even out and give me the coverage that I wanted in 2 coats, so I did end up doing a 3rd coat for this one, at least for the live swatch, which I do prefer how it looked in the end, but for my full hand swatches with just doing the 2 coats, I thought it still looked pretty good here too. Obviously my nails here are not as large as my thumbnail, so I think that also helps with the application and making it look a lot more even, especially as far as the base is concerned, because the flakies are maybe a little light, so you could still do another coat. And rounding out the collection, we have Big Reef Energy, which is a coral red jelly base packed with a primarily gold iridescent flaky, but there are also pops of pink and purple and blue, and this also has a gold reflective glitter. As you just saw, this one had a beautiful formula, very similar to Wait a Minute, where it just had such great coverage that was very pigmented, but still very even on the first coat alone. And while it does build up really beautifully on 2 coats where you get more of those flakies, more of that intense color, there still is this very glassy effect where I personally saw like a decent amount of nail line, so I did still want to do a 3rd coat for this one just to obscure it a little bit more. But again, that's totally optional and depending on your preference, you know, if you want more flakies or more coverage, because you could totally leave this on 2 coats and just have that really juicy, glassy jelly effect. I feel like the flakies in this one though ended up looking the most subtle out of the collection, I guess because the red base just kind of made the gold look a little orangey and then blend in with the base color. So while there are still some pops of color, I feel like this just didn't have the same contrast as some of the other shades. So I forgot to do this before, but here is a little clip of the shades worn as a lazy gradient under flash so you can see the reflective glitter in them. There are supposed to be different colors, but I mainly see silver with the exception of the pink reflective glitter in Don't Be Jelly, which as a reminder is the warm toned purple that's on the insides of my index and middle fingers. And here's a little collage of the full collection, worn again in 2 coats in direct sunlight, so you can just see the color palette here. Even though some of the shades are a little dark, I feel like they just overall have this really fun and colorful under the sea vibe. Now getting into comparisons, we're starting with Wait a Minute, and of course I have to show this next to Emerald City and Never Tied Down. I saw a lot of people guessing that the finishes of these were going to be similar to Emerald City, but these new shades definitely have a much larger flaky. There's also like no shimmer or anything, so it overall has a very different look visually, but the color is definitely very close to Never Tied Down. I was also obviously immediately reminded of a couple of Mooncat shades like Maelstrom and The Sea Between Us. Just from the bottle shot alone, I thought the color was going to be more similar to Maelstrom, but on the nail, it is a little bit closer to The Sea Between Us. That one is more of like a true blue though, like it's not as teal. There's also a dainty holo in the Mooncat shades too, but even aside from that, I think the iridescent flakies are just a bit larger in Holo Taco. And lastly, I tried to recreate some of these shades by doing some jelly sandwiches. Here I used Holo Taco's Lunar Unicorn Skin sandwiched in between ILNP's Turquoise Water, but that is just too light and too blue. So I thought to get a little bit more of that darker, slightly teal undertone, I could layer Turquoise Water over Cirque's Verdigris jelly, but that was a little too dark. Then for crashing out, I was immediately reminded of Mooncat's pomegranate seeds because, like I mentioned before, I feel like in the bottle it almost looks purple, but on the nail it leans a little bit closer to something like Mooncat's Cosmic Cowboy, which has a similar jelly, iridescent, flaky kind of finish. But they even have a similar colorway when it comes to that cobalt blue base and then these pink sort of iridescent flakies. But overall, I would say that Holo Taco is just more saturated, it's a little deeper in color, and the flakies just pop more. Then for my recreation, I of course had to use Cirque's Cobalt jelly, this time sandwiching Holo Taco's Aurora unicorn skin because it has those mix of purple and blue flakies. It's not exactly there, but definitely very similar vibes. I surprisingly didn't have anything close to Made Me Ink. I thought the closest shade that I had was this Danglefoot polish from Polish Pickup a couple of years ago called Iris-istible because it has these bright aqua kind of flakies in a blurple base, but that is just obviously several shades too light. Next for Don't Be Jelly, I wanted to quickly show this next to Mooncat's The Diabolical Mojo Jojo because even though it is a purple jelly iridescent flaky mix, it's a little too light and cool toned. When it comes to that warmer, almost magenta leaning purple shade, I immediately thought of Mooncat's Mood Ring, which also kind of has some similar pops of color with like those green and purple flakies, but again, the flakies just really pop a lot more in Holo Taco, but the base is also a lot darker. Then for my recreation attempt, I tried sandwiching Holo Taco's Aurora unicorn skin, this time in between Cirque's berry jelly and Eros jelly, but that combination is just a little too muted. Moving on to What a Catch, I wanted to quickly show this next to Mooncat's Blossom's Firebreath, which is the pink iridescent jelly from the Powerpuff Girls, but that is just way too light with a totally different flaky color. If anything, it is closer to something like Mooncat's Strangeberry, which has those matching golden iridescent flakies, but Strangeberry is what I would consider like a bright hot pink. It's just a lot lighter and also warmer. And here it is next to Deeply Superficial, which was the hot pink from the Thermal collection last summer, but that one is even cooler toned, so seeing these two next to each other, What a Catch definitely does look warmer. I would say the cold state of Deeply Superficial is more of like a true magenta kind of color, and they also have different colored flakies. Unfortunately, I couldn't really recreate What a Catch because the hot pink jellies that I have in my collection from both Cirque and ILNP are just a lot brighter and a lot warmer. And lastly, for Big Reef Energy, of course, I have to show this next to Mooncat's Forces of Evil, again from the Powerpuff Girls collab, and Mooncat's Shroomdom, both of which are red jelly bases packed with iridescent flakies. So interestingly enough, I feel like the flaky mix in Big Reef Energy is kind of like a combination of the Mooncat shades because it's just gold in Shroomdom, and Forces of Evil has this combination with pops of blue and red. So similar, but not dupes. And lastly, for my recreation attempt, I wanted to use Cirque's Lucky Jelly, which is their true red jelly base, and layering both Holo Taco's Lunar and Aurora unicorn skin for those pops of gold and blue and purple. Again, there's definitely similar vibes, but I do think Lucky Jelly is a little too dark. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons for Holo Taco's Off the Deep End collection. As always, I would love to know your thoughts on this release, especially the fact that these have a new finish. As a jelly lover, I definitely am excited we have something closer to just true jelly polishes, especially in like their more permanent catalog. The closest that Holo Taco has given us before were the retro anniversary jellies, which were limited edition, but even those I personally felt were a little bit more pigmented and buildable than like a true jelly finish. These definitely have like that much more glassy look to them, and it just looks so cool, especially layered with all of those flakies. I feel like I've said this so many times before, but with Holo Taco always trying to focus on like toppers and layering, I feel like they really have missed the mark on like not releasing plain jelly polishes, because that is the perfect base for layering. So I am still holding out hope that we will get some plain jellies from them, because, you know, I just love to see more brands do this finish. But I do think it would be especially fitting for Holo Taco with like their toppers and all of that. But let me know what you think. Either way, these polishes as standalone shades are so gorgeous. I really appreciated that they went with like a different iridescent flaky than they have used in the past, where even though they are larger and maybe caused some application issues for me, the end result is just so worth it that it's hard to be mad at them. And obviously I don't have any of these in my collection, but I do feel like this finish is very similar to some smaller indie brands like Rogue or Cuticula, who will also have these like really colorful iridescent flaky finishes. So yeah, overall I did really enjoy them. I mean, I think the colors are so bold and beautiful, even if they are like a bit darker, even for like summer shades for me. I admittedly am not really in the mood to wear these colors anytime soon unless it's like 85 degrees outside, but once summer hits, I definitely am excited to reach back for these because they just give such like mermaid tail vibes. Again, I do wish I had a little bit of a better experience as far as the application with these go, where if I remember correctly, about half of them kind of felt a little finicky for me. So I wish they were all just super smooth and glassy across the board, but they weren't bad by any means. It honestly might just be like the nature of these being such larger flakies, you know, that they can be a little finicky, almost similar to like chunky glitters, for example. So either way, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Leave me a like if you found it helpful, or just let me know any and all thoughts that you have down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!